shoot, where was I? What did I say already?
Those books, one of which I recommended.
Yes. No, you recommended both of these.
I did?
Actually. Yeah,
Okay.
so this book, funny thing, this book, which is Across the Rainbow Bridge by Kevin Crossley Holland, illustrated by Jeffrey Allen Love, this is a children's book you referred me to, which is not
that's
a
right.
bad thing.
Yeah.
But did you know that this was a children's book?
Yes.
Okay.
But
I was very surprised.
But it's very good.
It is very good. There's actually some interesting stories in here that I will summarize because it's a very short book.
Yes.
And I also read Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, which... So, fun story. When I went to the library to get both of these books, I asked for Across the Rainbow Bridge first. And they were like, okay. And then I was like, also, I want Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. And I spoke to 3 librarians about this. And all, like, you know, the first one I was like, where would I go for this? And they were like, oh, you would go here. Also, that book. All 3 of these librarians had Gaiman's book. I highly recommend. It's like all 3 of them. Like, the first one, I was like, I'm looking for Norse books. And they're like, cool, you should go talk to someone that will look those up for you. You can go here. And then I spoke to 2 different librarians about these 2 different books. Because this one was obviously in the children's section.
Right.
And this one was upstairs, somewhere in the confines of the Dewey Decimal System. And impossible for me to find.
Well, unless you know the Dewey.
Which I do not.
I used to. I used to.
So yeah, the Dewey Decimal woman... she said, oh, I love that book. Best way to learn about Norse mythology. I was like, fantastic. So you should read this at some point too.
I should. I actually just started, sort of tangentially relevant, The Sandman on Netflix, which is based on a Neil Gaiman book.
Another friend of mine just finished watching it and was like, dude, you have got to watch it. And I was like, yeah, I mean,
pretty good episode 1.
I mean, I've read the comics, so I imagine it's very fever dream. And he said, oh yeah.
The first episode seemed fairly lucid, and I was like, okay. But then I watched like a trailer, and I was like, whoa, this gets weird. I might have to stick around just to see what this is about.
Yeah.
There's a lot of scenes that I'm just like, I'm gonna want more context for that.
He said there was a Remus Lupin scene that was absolutely wild.
Yeah, that's one of the ones I was like, I need context. Because all I saw was Lupin, and I was just like, and I'm not going to spoil the line, but he said a line, and I was just like, I want to know what the fuck that meant. What did he mean by that?
I'm sure I'll know what line you're talking about when I get to it.
Yeah.
And you had 2 different books that you read.
My sources were the Edda, also known as the Prose Edda, by Snorri Sturluson, and the Poetic Edda, by various and sometimes unknown authors.
What's the distinction?
So the main distinction is that the Edda, the one called the Prose Edda, is written in prose form, whereas the Poetic Edda is a collection of epics and poems.
Yeah, that's the most obvious version.
It's the main one.
Yeah.
The Poetic Edda was kept as best they could, close to the original as they could manage. There's a lot of various translations. I have the one translated by Caroline Larrington. And the Prose Edda, it actually reads more like a classical textbook.
That's what I was afraid of.
Classical textbooks, much more interesting to read than modern textbooks.
Oh, are they?
And when I say classical, I mean like in a Roman, like Latin form, because they're typically written as a dialogue between a master and an apprentice. And so it almost reads like a story, and it's like the apprentice going, but master, what about this kinds of stuff? And he's like, well, we do this because explanation. And he goes, okay, but wouldn't that mean this? And they go, it would, but we get around that by doing this. And so it's an explanation of something to a novice. And so as a novice reading it, you're like, oh, I'm that guy. I'm the fucking idiot learning these things from the master. And so Snorri wrote the Prose Edda as, and I'm putting motive on him, I don't know that this was necessarily his intention, as like a textbook on how to compose traditional Icelandic poetry.
Okay, so Snorri was from Iceland.
Yes.
And when did he write this?
Boy, you got me on the spot. I don't know an exact year.
Okay.
I know it was when Iceland was still under Norwegian rule.
Okay. So are we
they
talking
were,
like pre-Dark Ages?
I want to say we're looking at like 1200s, 1300s,
Okay. So
around there.
So post Holy Wars.
Yeah, so Snorri was actually a Christian monk.
Okay.
And so one of the reasons I decided to do the Poetic Edda also was because a lot of these stories were bound to be Christianized in some way.
Yeah, that
when
came
they were
up.
translated by Snorri.
That came up in the intro to this book. It's in the foreword, like one of the first lines is, yeah, it's literally the first line. Just over 1,000 years ago, the rulers of Iceland decided that their island should officially become Christian.
Yep.
But they also wisely said that if any Icelanders preferred to go on worshipping the old gods, they could do so in private.
Yep. Interestingly, Snorri has a preface or a foreword that says almost the opposite, which is the stories that you're about to hear are the I don't know exactly how he phrased it, so obviously I'm paraphrasing, but in a sense he was saying these are the attempts of a simple people to make sense of an absolute truth. And you should in no way think that these are true things. They are probably more likely actual historical figures that in a long terms of storytelling have been raised to deific status.
In Gaiman's
and they
introduction,
are in no way the one true God.
Yeah, in Gaiman's introduction to his book, he said something similar. Yeah. He said, and this is what I thought was really interesting, which is I'm really curious to see what your findings are and the differences, because Gaiman said for his research, he read both of those books. He read the Poetic and the Prose Edda, specifically because of, I think the reason why you wanted to read both and find the distinctions is because a very, very Christian man from a society that was very recently, like 200 years prior, converted to Christianity, he wrote it.
Right.
And so he's got some...
Well, he actually, his analysis to me was pretty interesting to read, because he goes as far back as being like, look, this is the name Odin, also Woden, which comes from that, and like he traces it back. He's like, I'm pretty sure these are like Hellenistic Trojans that have come all the way over here, and that's who the Aesir were. And I was like, well, that's a fairly sound argument. Like you're looking on the map, you're like, this shit tracks. I don't know.
Yeah, because there's the Aesir gods and the Vanir gods,
right.
And at some point there was a union and a peace treaty.
Yeah,
but
there's the war between them, and then Mimir gets his head cut off.
The interesting thing I noticed was most of the gods from that pantheon that we know of are Aesir, and most of the goddesses that we know from those pantheons are Vanir.
Yeah.
What's that about? Do you know?
Nah, I mean, I can't really think of something unless, I mean, if I'm looking at it from like an archetypal or a Jungian perspective, the idea that the masculine is like order and civilization and progress, and the feminine is like the earthly, the creative, the material, then the Aesir represent civilization and the coming of civilization. That's why Odin is constantly looking for knowledge. He's what ordered the world, like he built the world.
He's always seeking to become wiser.
Right. And then most of the feminine or creative aspects come from the more material, which would be the Vanir. They're the earthly beings that were already here.
We get poetry from the Vanir.
Yeah, Odin stole it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like warlords do.
Yeah. But one of the interesting things about, if you're going to read one of the Eddas, I highly recommend reading both and starting with the prose, because, like I said, it reads like a textbook for writing Icelandic poetry, which means it's a textbook for understanding Icelandic poetry. Oh, okay. And if I had started reading the Poetic Edda without that, I'd have been so fucking lost. Mainly because the Icelandic skalds have this, I don't know if you call it a style or a concept. It's called a kenning.
A what?
A kenning. So Kenning. Kenning. Where they'll substitute a noun for like a metaphoric phrase.
Substituting a noun
So
for
instead
a
of saying
phrase.
yeah, instead of saying the word poetry,
Yeah.
they would say Odin's mead.
Right, because I mean that's where the story comes from.
Right. Because in the story Odin stole mead
Yeah.
that was poetry and came and he spit it into a
Yeah,
jar
that's
and then
right.
they all drank
I
from it.
I remember hearing about this. They often would use phrases in reference to a story to describe
Yes.
just literally
So
the thing they're talking
It's a
about.
metaphorical descriptive phrase.
Yeah.
But they would do that to like keep like the rhyme and the meter or whatever they were trying to do because the noun just wouldn't fit. Like,
Yeah.
I can't just say Odin. It's not going to fit.
The,
So I have to do this kenning thing.
the name Odin in their language, what even was it?
Odin was one of them, but there's like 27 names.
And you gotta use all
for
of them.
Odin. Yeah, and it's kind of funny in the prose edda, you get to. It doesn't say you met Odin, but if you know all of Odin's name, you know that this guy was talking to Odin.
Yeah.
Because it says he comes into a hall and he sees 3 kings on 3 thrones, each one stacked on top of one of another. And the king on the bottom is High. That's his name.
High.
High. And the
Love
king in
that.
the middle is Higher.
There's what?
Higher.
It's higher.
And the king on top is the Most High.
The Most High.
And all 3 of those are names for Odin.
High as in not hello. High as in
High
I
as
am
in
high.
he's like the High King.
I am the High King. I'm the
Yes.
higher king. I am
I'm the most high
highest king.
All of which are names for Odin. And so it's like this guy meets King High, King Higher, and King the Most High, not knowing that that is Odin. But at one point, those kings, being Odin, say, "Oh yeah, there's the Odin, the Allfather, who has all these names." In which he says all 3 of those names.
Yeah.
So if the guy's paying attention, he's like, "Oh fuck me, that's
The same guy.
you're Odin."
You're Odin.
But he never figures it out.
Wow. Okay. He
And
never
like, the whole thing is written as this guy who comes asking all these questions and like
Yeah.
traveled to
yeah.
to Asgard
It's
to ask them.
it's a shorthand for them,
Yes.
which I think the way that they do it poetically is interesting.
Yeah. But it gets confusing because they can link like metaphors and kennings to mean one big thing. So like it was common to refer to the ocean in similar terms as land, but then tie in like some sort of aquatic theme, like a whale. So you'd be like the League of Whales. That meant the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And then a ship would be the steed on the League of Whales. Because the ship was a vehicle like a horse that you would ride, and the land you ride that horse on would be the ocean.
Yeah.
And then shields, when they would sail, they would stack the shields on the side of the ship. It was
Yeah.
defensive capability for the ship, but it also gave you somewhere to put your fucking shield.
Which
Because there wasn't a lot
pretty-
of a lot of floor space.
I mean, it's
on those
practical,
ships.
really. I love that.
Yeah, but so then they would refer to shields sometimes as fences of ships, and so instead of saying a shield, you could get a kenning that would say the fence of the steed of the League of Whales.
The fence
And you're
of
like,
the steed
I got to
of the
start at
League
the
of
end
Whales.
and figure out what the fuck that means to get all the way back to the beginning and go, oh, it's a shield.
It's a shield.
Because they wouldn't just say shield.
They would-
Because it didn't fit the poetry, like the poetic form that they were
I
going
take
for.
it the prose edit takes the time to explain this.
Yes, that's how I know any of them. And so when I started reading the Poetic Edda, it was a lot easier to understand because I knew, like, when they translate, they do a good job of hyphenating in the kenning, so you know that that's a kenning.
Okay.
And so you read it. And then you just learn, like, these metaphors. Like, sometimes they call rivers forests of fish traps. And they'll refer to fish traps as trees of the river.
and
And they're
then
sort of interrelated.
and then you'll have kids that are like, "Why is it referred to like that?" And it's like, "Well, let me tell you this story."
Yeah. A lot of times, gold is referred to as some kind of fire, like fire of the river. You
Okay.
find gold and fire of the river. The fire of the arm was like a gold band you'd wear on your arm.
That
Swords are often referred to as storms, like battles or storms.
It's really interesting, like how closely tied just literally their culture is to their gods in that way. Because like
Yeah.
you're making specific references to all these things, and I can glean what stories you're referencing.
Yeah.
because I've read these books.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's
Well,
why
it
that
works
story
the other
exists.
way in that growing up you would teach kids all these stories.
Yeah.
You wouldn't teach them how to compose poetry. You would teach them the stories.
Yeah.
But then they would hear the poetry. Anytime there was a feast, their uncle would get up and they'd recite this poem. And now they know what he's talking about because they know the story. And then they grow up knowing the story, knowing those metaphors. And then when they compose their own stuff, they extrapolate even further and they make even more.
Well, now I understand
Metaphors of
what
poetry.
Gaiman rather was talking about in his introduction, because he was talking about the tragedy of how many stories have been lost from Norse mythology. Like, this is so little, and it's the tragedy of it is a man who was like, this is all bunk. This is my understanding, my interpretation of this. It was a man that was not a part of the culture that was explaining it, and that was what was accepted. And so because that was the only thing that was accepted, broadly speaking, there's so much that's lost.
Yeah, even if we have all of the stories, even if we have all the stories, we don't have the understanding of the stories that comes with generations of being brought up believing the stories is true, living in a culture where everything got passed down in poetic form with metaphors based on those exact stories. Like, there could be kennings in poems we don't understand because the story they relate to we don't have.
You know, I think it's really interesting because clearly poetry was very, very important for them.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it needed to be, because did the Icelanders, did they like write their stories down, or was it all just passed down?
Generally speaking, the way most civilizations advance is you start oral.
Right.
And so the reason most of the old stuff we can find is in poetic form is because it was the easiest to remember. And so it's very likely that they were told orally for a very long time before anyone bothered to write them down at all.
Then that's what I figured it was going to be, because I think that's why the language is structured in that way, because it has to be. That's how they figured out over generations, I'm guessing, the most sensible way to structure their language so they could remember all of this stuff that their culture needed to know.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
It's very smart. And Icelandic skalds, which is what they call their poets, are called skalds, were famous throughout the world that knew of them. I mean, Norwegian kings refused to have Norwegian poets in their courts. They would import skalds from Iceland. They're like, no, y'all are way better at this.
I love that.
These Norwegians suck. Give me one of them Icelanders. They're fucking bomb, dude. So read the Edda first, the prose Edda, then the poetic Edda. Read them side by side, however you want to do that. But if you're going to read the poetic, you got to read the prose. Otherwise, so much is going to be lost on you. You're just not going to understand some of the stuff. You're going to read a sentence, be like, what the fuck is a fish of the valley?
I mean,
what does that
sense.
even mean?
Because I tried to read, like, an older text of the Divine Comedy, and I was like, I can't.
It's hard.
I don't understand. I'm reading it, but I'm not comprehending anything.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at it in English, and you're like, are you sure it's English?
Yeah. I got an audiobook that I should listen to it at some point. It is a more modern translation of it that is an attempt to better convey what the original text was trying to say in a way that, we can understand. And I just haven't gotten around to listening to it.
Yeah. The Divine Comedy is really good.
Yeah.
That's if we were covering outside of mythology, maybe we do parts of the Divine Comedy for Abrahamic, but
I was going to say
the Divine Comedy itself has influenced so much what modern Christians and even modern non-Christians understand about like Abrahamic hell.
It's true. I mean, when
most of your idea of what it is not biblically founded.
Even from a cultural perspective, like an American's view of what hell is directly, it comes from the Divine Comedy.
Yeah, you can almost draw a straight line.
Yeah.
Like, there it is. It's like that, Milton's Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, and a little bit of the Book of Revelations. And you're like, I'm pretty sure I know what hell is.
Yeah. But
it's mostly those two like works of fiction, not the Bible, that people are like, that's what hell is.
Yeah, no. I remember my dad was straight up like, we don't actually know that there's a hell. And I was like, what do you mean?
What?
And he was like, well, you see, my parents were Jews, so let me tell you a thing or two.
Hell, never heard of her.
Yeah. He was like, actually, the Divine Comedy. Anyways, we are not on Abrahamic myths.
We are not. We're on Norse myths.
So the stories that I wanted to specifically tell and the stories that you wanted to specifically tell is what we should tell the audience.
Yes. So 3 that I'm going to do, and only 2 of them are actually stories. One's more of an event. It is how Odin lost his eye. Odin is notoriously one-eyed.
That's like chapter 2 of this book.
Yeah.
Of Gaiman's book, I should say.
Does he like go into a whole story about it? I've heard like there's dialogue and everything.
Hang
that
on.
does not exist.
I should have the index readily available to access. So yeah, it's an introduction. The players is chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
Before the beginning and after is chapter 2. Chapter 3 is about Yggdrasil and the 9 worlds. Like basically just explaining
laying
what
out
it
the
is.
geography of it all. Yeah.
The first actual story is Mimir's head and Odin's eye.
Okay, perfect. In the prose Edda and in the poetic Edda, there is no overt tale saying this is what happened and why.
Okay.
It just says this did happen, and we know it did.
Okay.
But it doesn't explain necessarily like the motive behind it, the purpose to it, when necessarily. So, other than it had to have happened, presumably before the Aesir-Vanir War, because Mimir still had his head.
Yeah. Yeah.
It gets cut off after that.
Remind me, for people that don't know, and also because I'm not fully clear on it, who is Mimir?
Mimir is a Jotun, an ice giant, or just a giant, that lives by Mimir's well. It's only known by Mimir's well, so it's almost famous because Mimir lives there.
Yeah.
And is actually
one and
Odin's
the same, really.
maternal uncle.
Odin's maternal uncle.
Yeah, it is Odin's mother's brother. Because Odin's mom, also a Jotun. He's half ice giant.
Okay, sure. Oh, that's right. That makes more sense. So because in the players, that's the first chapter.
Yeah,
it
just
talks
explains
about
who everybody is.
Well, yeah, but it talks about mainly the big 3, basically, as far as I guess Gaiman could tell, which was Odin, Thor, and Loki.
Yes.
And it
Those
says
are the
that
main characters, if there is one.
Yeah, and it says that Loki is the blood brother to Odin.
Yes.
Distinct difference from Marvel Comics.
Correct.
Which was my first introduction to Norse gods.
Well, and Hel is actually Loki's daughter, not their sister.
Yeah, so
Loki and Thor aren't brothers.
So Loki is Odin's blood brother, and Loki is basically the father of most, if not all, monsters.
Yeah, I mean, at least the main ones.
Yeah.
He's the father of Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. He's the father of Fenrir the wolf.
Or Fenrir Wolf.
Yeah.
Is also another name. That
he's the father of Hel.
Yeah.
He's the father of Sleipnir. Sleipnir.
The
horse, eight-legged
horse,
yeah.
which is one of the stories I want to talk about, actually.
That would be great. So anyway, Odin's Eye, and then the 2 actual stories, the death of Balder.
Yeah.
And Thor's fake wedding. If we have time to get to that one.
Okay, so you didn't want to talk about Ragnarok. I thought you did.
As much as I love talking about doomsdays in every culture, no. However, that does relate to the death of Balder. Because the death of Balder is, as far as Odin was aware, the first domino that sets Ragnarok off.
Because in the way Gaiman tells it, it's kind of a 3-part story, right? The death of Balder, and why Balder remained dead,
right? And
then Ragnarok happening.
Yes.
Because all they understood was, the prophecy of Ragnarok was, once Balder dies, Ragnarok will soon come after.
Yeah.
And so they were like, okay, we'll just fucking make sure that Balder doesn't die.
Never dies. Yeah. And that's part of the story, so we can get into that. And then what stories did you want to go over?
The stories that I want to go over. The first one I want to go over is The Treasures of the Gods. Mm-hmm. That one is pretty cool. And then The Master Builder.
Also a good one.
Yeah. So,
okay.
how should we go about
I would
this?
say let's start with Odin's eye.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
Chronologically,
chronologically
that's
that
the
makes sense,
earliest.
and it is the shortest.
Yes.
The basics is just that, to do a little bit of, but a worse job than Neil Gaiman, of laying out the geography here.
Mm-hmm.
You have Yggdrasil, the world ash, or the world tree.
Yeah.
It's traditionally an ash tree, which was also what man was made out of.
Yes, and it was ash, and there was another one, because they used one to make men and one to make women.
Yeah. Fuck, it wasn't Rowan, was it?
I think it was you.
I don't know. I didn't write that one down. I
I
didn't write either of them down. I just remember
I'll
that man
look.
was ash.
You talk. I'll look.
Okay. Anyway, the world tree, everything is situated in and around the world tree. The world tree has 3 roots.
It's Embla.
Embla.
Embla is what I believe women are made out of.
Yeah. All right. Now you know. Ash and Embla.
Elm.
Elm tree. There
Elm
it is.
tree is what women
I
are
love
made
elm
out of.
trees. That makes
Ash
sense.
is what men are made out of.
Both of which you can't plant here, but that's a plant fact we don't need to get hung up
Here being mid-Missouri.
fatal diseases to both. Really just the state of our world. So anyway, there's 3 roots to Yggdrasil. One root lies among the Aesir in Asgard.
Yeah.
One either covers, goes over, or is in Ginnungagap, or what's left of it, in Jotunheim, among the frost giants. And then one's in Niflheim. That's where Nidhogg the dragon chews on it.
Yeah, Nidhogg. It says right here,
yeah.
Dragon Nidhogg.
Underneath that second root,
Mm-hmm.
in Jotunheim, that is where Mimir's well is. It is one of the ways in which the world tree is watered. It gathers water from this. The well contains wisdom and intelligence. So the reason Mimir is so damn smart is he drinks from it every day. And Odin, in his infinite quest for knowledge, goes to Mimir's well. Presumably it's not too difficult because it is his fucking uncle.
Yeah,
And
he's probably just saying hello.
And he says, I'd like to drink from it. And Mimir says, you need to make some kind of sacrifice. I want your eye. And so, thinking that would be enough to deter him, he is proven wrong. When Odin rips his eye out, the prose and the Poetica disagree to a certain extent on whether or not the eye sits on the well, like on the side, or if it's in the well itself.
Per Gaiman's telling, it's in the well.
That makes more sense to me.
It's part of... I mean, he didn't explicitly say it, but the way I interpreted it is part of the reason why Odin has that wisdom is because his eye is in the well.
Because he can see into intelligence and wisdom. And then, in exchange for an eye, Mimir gives him 1 drink.
Yeah.
That's it. An eyeball gets you
1 drink.
1 drink out of the well. One thing I found interesting is that what he drinks it out of is called Gallarhorn.
Love that.
But it's definitely a drinking horn.
Yeah.
Heimdallr,
Uh-huh.
the god that guards the Bifrost Bridge,
Yeah.
has a sounding horn, like a trumpet, also called Gjallarhorn. I don't know if those are the same horn or not.
I mean, a Gjallarhorn is also what you would just use to describe that kind of horn.
Right.
So the question is
So
it
could
the
be,
same horn?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if it's the exact same horn
or
if they're just...
Maybe that was the first one and then all subsequent Gjallarhorns
I mean,
were...
they're both capital G.
Yeah.
Proper noun, Gjallarhorn. So I don't know. But Gjallarhorn is what Heimdallr rings to signal that Ragnarok has begun, to warn all the gods.
Mm-hmm.
So if they are the same horn, what does it mean that the horn that Odin gained wisdom from is also the horn that announces the end of the world?
I mean, there's 2 ways to look at that. The way I look at it is that, the wisdom that Odin receives. I mean, by definition, wisdom is something that you learn, after the fact, right? It's intelligence versus wisdom intelligence is you understand for example, to avoid doing something because you learned it and you were like, okay, yeah. But wisdom is something that you learn.
Yeah. The way I've always described it is that intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit.
Yeah.
Wisdom is knowing it doesn't go in a fruit salad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
And you
perfect
know
analogy.
that if you've tried it. And you go, that's terrible. It's a fruit, though. Doesn't work.
No.
Doesn't. You got
You put
apples,
it
you got
in-
grapes, you got cantaloupe, tomato.
Tomato
not going in
is
there.
great with a vegetable salad.
That's right. not a fruit salad. Yeah, so I think that's interesting that the vessel through which he has obtained wisdom and intelligence would also be the instrument by which he is forewarned of the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean that's a pretty direct correlation in my mind, is that it's
I
what announces what you need to know.
I think it's the well had a lot of knowledge, and one of those pieces of knowledge was how the world was going to end.
Right.
And that's why he knew.
Yeah. And then, I mean, this isn't a story per se, but I think it really drives home the idea of sacrifice for greater gain. That, an eyeball can see what's in front of you.
Yeah.
But it's pretty limited vision. I mean, as humans, we don't even have a 180-degree field of vision.
No.
So it doesn't see that damn much. So to trade that to be able, I mean, what wisdom is seeing way more.
Mm-hmm.
And then, water.
But it's seeing things that are not in front of you.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the ability to think, plan, to expect things, to see the outcome before it happens.
Yeah.
And then water typically, and I'll probably say this like every podcast, is a common symbol for the unconscious. And a well, I mean, the underground is also a very common symbol for the unconscious. And a well is just water that's underground.
Mm-hmm.
So it's double unconscious. And he removes consciously the thing that can see what's in front of him to gain from the unconscious the ability to see things that aren't in front of him.
It's something that I think is really interesting about stories that primarily feature Odin. Like, whenever Odin is going on adventures, it's usually in an effort to gain more wisdom.
Yes.
And so I think it's interesting that, like, in most of those stories where he's, like, trying to gain more wisdom, he's being very unwise.
Yes.
In his adventures.
Yeah. Well, and even the sort of follow-on from this story is he ends up hanging himself in Yggdrasil. Because now he knows that that's what he needs to do. So he learns from the well that the way to manipulate destiny is you actually have to carve runes into the wood of Yggdrasil itself.
Uh-huh.
And so to learn how to do that, he has to make a sacrifice. And so he hangs himself from the tree while impaling himself with his spear for 9 days and nights, and commands all the other Aesir gods that they are not to bring him food or water. And so he suffers for 9 days and 9 nights to learn how to use magic runes.
I think I remember that coming up in American Gods.
Yeah.
I think Shadow had to do that at some point as well.
That's a rough go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he gets wiser.
Yeah.
But he earns it.
He has to obtain the wisdom.
Yeah, you can't just hand somebody wisdom. You gotta go, you want wisdom? It's like Mimir. This is his nephew. He's not being unduly cruel. He's like, if you want to know something, you're gonna have to go through it.
I mean, yeah. Like, that's like it's kind of like sometimes somebody, I'm not gonna go into specific stories because like I've had this happen a lot of times. Like, someone will ask me, how do I do this? And it's like, well, the answer to what they want to do is actually very simple. And I can give them that simple answer, but they'll just be like, I have no idea what you mean. Like, they're incapable of understanding what I just said to them because it's so contrary to what, like, the answer I give them is basically telling them to do something that they've never done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, let me put it this way. What if I was like, Ryan, how do I act?
Right. It's like, okay, well, first you want to project. You want to face the audience. And you want to become your character. You want to think like your character would. I'm
going to tell you, walking away from this, I'm no better an actor.
Right.
I know those things now.
Right.
Doesn't help.
No, you have to go through the process to understand what you're being
Well,
told.
I shouldn't say it doesn't help. It helps to direct the experience.
Yeah.
Now I know what experience I need to go get.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I'm not a better actor now. I just know how to go be one.
Like basically what
I
would need to say, like the wisest thing to say whenever somebody asks you a question like that is tell them the first step of their journey.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what these stories do.
Well, and that's what I think Mimir was doing, because of all the sacrifices Odin makes over his lifetime. Giving up an eye is like the least. And so when he's like, "Hey, Uncle Mimir, let me get a drink of that well," he's like, "You're gonna have to give something up."
Yeah.
Because it's only gonna get harder from here.
Yeah.
And you might as well give it up now. Learn how to accept that loss and take the benefits that's gonna come with that. Because it's gonna be worth it, but you're not gonna know that in the moment. So you go ahead and rip that fucking eye out, and then maybe I'll give you a drink.
And
he's
he
like,
did
done.
it
And he's
like unquestioningly.
yeah. And then that's when Amir's like, fucking take a drink, man. You earned that. You know? Like, he went through the pain. He gave up the thing. You get the wisdom.
I mean, it speaks to Odin's tenacity to become wiser.
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, all the other stuff about Odin aside, he's way better than Zeus.
Oh, yeah.
But
I agree.
He's still not great.
He's not, but I
will
totally
say
agree.
the journey towards trying to be wiser is something I think everybody can relate to.
Yeah.
And that humanizes him in such a sympathetic way that it's hard to be like, yeah, fuck Odin, dude.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I was listening to these
like,
stories, because I couldn't help but compare them to the Greek myths we just went over.
Yeah.
And
you're just like, this guy's a fucking Prince Charming compared to the rapist we just read about.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, it's hard to even see the bad things. We're like, I don't know, Odin kind of being a dick.
Like, man, like, there's no rape in any of these stories.
None of them forced themselves on anyone else.
It was so refreshing compared to Greek.
And, you know, I'll say that does reflect culturally in that, as far as I'm aware, and unless something's come out new that proves this incorrect, Viking women could divorce.
Yeah.
They could own land. They could theoretically hold positions of power, although I don't think it's necessarily common that they did.
That was something the children's book, Across the Rainbow Bridge, talked about in the foreword, is like one of the important things about this book is, you know, showing the equality of men and women.
They were surprisingly egalitarian, especially for their time. I mean, in some places even today they're better than that. There's places today women aren't allowed to drive and go to school. But like, even by today's civilized, modern, Western or Eastern society, we're like, yeah, first world country. The Vikings still did some stuff that we're like, we could learn from that. Yeah. We could probably work better on doing that stuff.
Yeah. Probably could lean more that way.
Yeah. But anyway, that is the story of Odin losing his eye.
Yeah.
He gives it up willingly for wisdom.
Hi, this is Functionally Literate. Hope you've been enjoying listening. This episode is brought to you by me. I made this show. I'm Ryan. I'm broke. If you could donate a little money my way with a sponsorship or a product, like, I'll be a shill for money. And I'm going to use that money with which to buy books, because let me tell you, right now I'm checking stuff out of the library, and it's rough. You can email me at funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is FUNC.LIT.POD@gmail.com. You could also be a patron of this podcast. That's right. This podcast, Functionally Literate, we're going places. We have a Patreon now. You can give me $1, and in exchange, you will be able to listen to this podcast ad-free. That means right now, you don't have to listen to this bit. You can listen to the podcast uninterrupted. It just goes without me going on about things that you don't care about. Just for $1. And that will increase in value every 2 weeks because there will be another ad-free episode. additionally, if you'd like to just pitch a little money my way, like you're not interested in being a patron, you can go to my PayPal, which is also in there. I made a Funklit PayPal. It'll all be in the description. Links all the links in the description. So the story that I want to talk about next is, let me turn to it because I'm going to need the reference. The Treasures of the Gods.
Oh man, some good stuff in here.
Yeah. So I also need my phone because that's where I wrote my summarized notes. Scrolling. Yeah, so this story really, it's basically about how Thor got Mjolnir.
Yeah.
Like, that's
like
biggest,
the biggest one, yeah.
significance to it, especially to me, because, like, you know, Thor is in the Avengers. That's,
right.
You know, he's awesome, and I want to know how he got his freaking hammer.
And then in Ragnarok, they break it.
Yeah, yeah. And then in Love and Thunder, it comes back even stronger.
Of course. It's very comic book.
Yeah. Like, you know what it does? Like, you'll love this. So, the thing,
Spoilers for Thor Love and Thunder.
So now, because it was broken, it's come back together.
Mm-hmm.
And now it can break apart when it's thrown, and each little piece can hit different things, and then it'll come back together.
Interesting utility.
So now it's, in addition to all of its other powers, it also casts Magic Missile.
Yeah. It for those D&D lovers out there, it goes from bludgeoning damage to piercing.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of resistances, in case it comes up. I don't know. It's also a magical weapon. In case your DM asks, immunity not magical. Magical. Fuck you. All right. So how does Thor get Mjolnir?
So, well, it starts with Thor waking up next to his wife Sif, which is another distinction from the comics. Is he never actually gets with Sif, which I think is bogus.
They're playing the long game.
Yeah,
Natalie Portman's not into it.
No, he's married to Sif, and he wakes up one morning and he looks at her and she's bald.
Love it.
Her beautiful blonde hair
that she was famous for.
Yeah,
she was known for her beautiful hair.
Is gone completely. Okay. And
Patrick Stewart gone.
So Thor, he picks up his belt, which I didn't know this belt existed, a Meginjord, which doubles his already immense strength.
If you want to know where the D&D belts of giant strength items come from.
Yeah.
It's right there. It's Thor's belt.
Yeah, no joke. So yeah, he puts his belt on, you know, he gets dressed and he's like, Loki did it.
That son of a bitch.
And Sif's like, how do you know it's Loki? And Thor's like, whenever anything like this happens, I just assume it's Loki. It saves a lot of time.
Yeah.
So he goes to Loki, and he's like, why did you do this? And he's like, you know, he puts him over a barrel, basically. Like, he starts beating him up and, like, threatening him. And Loki's like, I thought it was funny. I was drunk and I thought it would be funny. And he's like...
in Loki's defense, which I won't say often, but I'll say it here. It is. It is funny. It is absolutely ridiculous and hilarious.
Well, Thor does not think it's funny.
Well, of course not. If someone
all.
shaved my wife's head, I'd be livid. That said, if someone shaved someone else's wife's head,
yeah,
I'll laugh.
Well, Thor decides that he thinks it would be funny to break every bone in Loki's body and then come back the next day and do it again. Yeah, and just ad nauseum, just do it every day.
It's very Prometheus-esque.
Yeah, and he's like, I think it'll take me about an hour to do today, and I think in a month I'll get it down to 15 minutes. I think this is going to be a very interesting month. And so he starts to break the first bone, and Loki's like, I'll go to the dwarves. I'll go to the dwarves and I'll fix this. And he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, the dwarves can make anything. I will ask them to make beautiful golden hair better than she had before. Ever growing lustrous golden locks. I promise I will go to the dwarves and I'll get that done. And Thor's like, well, get to it then. And so Loki, in just classic trickster god cliche, he can never do anything normal. He can't just go to the dwarves and commission them to make beautiful golden
I'll pay you
hair.
to make some hair.
Yeah.
Sif.
No. So he goes to 2 groups of dwarves. He goes, hold on, I wrote it down here. He goes to the sons of Ivaldi, these 3 dwarves, and he tells them, hey, could you tell me where I could find Brock and Eitri? I've heard that they are like the best craftsmen, around.
Yeah.
And the sons of Ivan are like, what? We're way better than them. No, us. And Loki's like, I heard Brock and Eitri were pretty good. Could you tell me where they are? And they're like, nah, piss on them. Like, we can make way better stuff than them. And he's like, well, I heard this about Brock and Eitri, and they said that they wanted to challenge you to, like, the gods. And they were like, what's the challenge? And he was like, you got to make 3 treasures and present them to the gods, and the gods are going to, like, decide who made the best shit. And they were like, well, yeah, we're going to do that. And he's like, oh, and one more thing. One of the treasures has to be, like, ever-growing golden, like, hair that can,
Yeah,
like,
functions like real hair, but made of gold.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, super easy. Of course.
So then...
Anybody can do that.
So then he goes and visits Brock and Eitri.
Yeah.
And he tells them basically the same thing and tells them... like, that the sons of Ivan were basically saying, like talking smack, and was like, oh, they think they're way better than you, and they challenge you to this competition. And he tells them, the same stipulations. And Brock is, like, skeptical. He's like, oh, really? The gods have posed this challenge. And you have no stake in this? Like, there's no reason that... this is...
that you're telling me, not someone else.
And Loki's like, no, this, I swear, this is what they said. And Brock, because he's skeptical, is like, okay, fine. But one extra condition then, Loki. If we win, because the sons of Ivan think they're so great, I get your head.
Yeah.
And Loki's like, sure.
Of course.
And so they get to it. So Brock and Eitri get to work. Eitri's the one that makes all the stuff, and Brock's the one that works the bellows. And so Eitri's like, okay, so for this first one, I need you to just, like, keep the temperature consistent the whole time. And so he's doing that, but he gets started, and there's this black fly that is bugging Brock. And it starts biting him. It's very distracting.
It's very annoying. Anyone that's ever swam in a lake, you know what that's like.
Yeah.
Horseflies. Hate them.
Yeah. And so Brock fucking hates it, but he doesn't, like, try to swat the fly away.
No, he's got discipline.
He's got shit to do. And so, yeah, the first thing that was made was amazing. It was this arm ring. I don't remember the Norse name. It's in here
I believe
somewhere.
it's Dropnir.
Yeah, but they refer to it as the dripper. They call it both things, but they're like, the dripper? Why is it called that? And it's like, well, it drips these rings that are exact copies of this one every 9 days. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And he's like, yeah, so now I'm going to make the second thing. I need you to pump the bellows even harder, but you got to keep the temperature the same. And he's like, okay. And that black fly, again, fucking, it, bites his neck, bites his forehead, and but he's like, no, I got to keep doing this.
You got to keep the forge steady.
Gotta fucking keep the forge steady. Eitri comes back, is like, excellent. Second thing is made. This is awesome. Now to this third thing. This is going to be the hardest thing yet. You're going to have to pump the bellows even harder. It's got to be even hotter. And you cannot let the temperature fluctuate. He's like, okay. And this time, that black fly is relentless. It bites his eyelids. It bites both of his eyelids and his nose and his lips.
Sounds so uncomfortable. I mean, like, my eyes are watering.
And this, it's like literally it bit his eye so hard it was bleeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so it looked like he was crying blood. And so this is just too much for Brock. He has to swat this fly. So he
I could take it.
pumps the bellows down as hard as he fucking can. Yeah, sure, I bet. And he pumps those fucking bellows as hard as he can and swats at it real quick and then, keeps pumping the bellows. Pretty soon after that, Ichi's like, stop! And then he goes back in and he's like, I don't know what the fuck you were doing. The temperature was all over the place, man.
It's ruined.
And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, like, what happened? And he's like, the handle's gonna be too short. Hopefully it'll do.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay. And so then, pretty soon after that, Loki walks in. And it's like, are the treasures made then? And Brock's staring at him, bloodshot eyes and, bleeding face and neck.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm gonna really enjoy taking your head off. It's personal now.
Oh boy!
Because Loki did it. Loki was that fly.
Of course he did. Like, the shapeshifter I threatened to decapitate isn't messing with me. I don't think so.
And so the sons of Ivan and then Brock and Eitri, they go to the gods to present their gifts. And literally Loki just walks in and he's like, hey, so these two groups of dwarves have this really fun challenge. They want to present each of you 3 treasures, and you guys get to vote on which, group made the best treasures. And Odin's like, oh, I love that.
Yeah, sounds great. Heck yeah, I'll take stuff. Free stuff.
Yeah.
He is wise enough now not to turn that down. One eye later, he goes, I'll take free stuff.
Yeah.
I paid for the last drink.
Yeah. So the first treasure was Odin's spear, Gungnir.
Gungnir, yeah. That's the one he impaled himself on when he hung himself in the world tree.
Yeah, well, he wasn't. I don't think he was thinking about that.
Probably not.
At the time when he got it.
Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting that in the Edda it tells it in that order because this takes place after he gets his wisdom, or at least it's told after that story.
Yeah, they're very fluid in their timeline. It's not always real clear what thing happens.
Gungnir didn't come up in the other story. I'm gonna assume that's Gaiman's attempt to just kind of have some
sort of timeline.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because he says straight up his approach to it and what he encourages other people's approach to it is learn the stories and tell them your way.
Yeah,
which I think is amazing.
Yeah,
that's classic. That's classic Bard.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he's like, hey, yeah, no, this spear, when you throw it, it won't miss. And Odin's like, well, that's perfect, seeing as I only have one eye.
Yeah.
Love that.
Shitty death perception, but got him.
Yeah. And so then the second thing that the sons of Ivan present is the golden hair. It's a wig. It's a magical wig. Yeah. And Thor's like, wow, okay, try it on, Sif. Sif puts it on. And then immediately it starts sinking into her roots. Mm-hmm. Because Loki ripped her hair out by the roots.
Right.
It wasn't going to grow back.
Mm-hmm.
So this wig just sinks into her scalp.
Yeah.
And
now
then
it's just
she's
living golden hair.
And then she sweeps her hair and she's like, I love it. And Thor's like, impressive. Good job.
I have a pretty wife again.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then Sif immediately fucks off to go show off her new hair to her friends.
She's like, I don't care about the rest of these. Spears and shit. I don't care.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Hold on. There was one more thing. It was a silk scarf. Or at least it looks like a silk scarf. And this was presented to Frey. No, Sif. So Sif did leave. For some reason, I conflated Sif and Frey because before I read this book, I didn't realize that Frey and Freya were siblings and separate entities.
Yep.
Yeah. Whenever Frey or Freya was referenced, I always thought it was like the same person. But yeah, no. So Freya was given this silk scarf, folded up silk scarf, and he's like, "Well, what's this?" And he's like, "Well, while it looks like a silk scarf, it's actually a ship.
Yep.
It's called Skidbladnir. Skidbladnir.
Yeah.
You unfold it, turns into a ship. Frey's
Don't want a ship? Fold it back up.
Frey's pretty impressed.
It's cool shit.
So then it was Brock and Itri's turn. So the first thing that they present is Dropnir.
Yep.
They give that, and they're like, "Here you go." He's
make more rings.
Odin puts it on. He's
rich.
like, "What's up with this ring?" And they're like, "Every 9 days, it will drip 9 identical rings that you can gift to people."
Yep.
And Odin's like, "Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
lots of money.
I can give people free gifts
All the time.
Great.
Yeah.
Love that.
What I always wondered, do the copies also do that?
I don't think so.
Is it just the original that makes
I was thinking
more,
that
or
would
do
be
the
like
copies make copies?
I was thinking that would make for like a fun D&D quest. Like
that'd
it's
be
like,
a very like
find the ring. Like which one is the real Dropnir?
one. Yeah. That'd be cool.
The second gift that Brock and Itri present is this mechanical boar. Very fast mechanical boar to haul chariots. It was very fine. They were like, "Yeah, no, I love this. I love this." Taking it all in. Then the last gift was Mjolnir.
Yep.
They present it in front of Thor, and Thor's, looking at it, and the smacky part is very impressive.
Yeah, he's like, "This is good."
Yeah, he's like this. He looks at it and he's like, the handle's pretty short. Like that's the first thing he says about it. And Brock's like, "That's my fault. I was handling the bellows. I'm very sorry about that. I hope you won't judge this hammer too harshly, though, because it is very impressive. When you throw this hammer, it will never miss. And it will come back to you. Also, when you throw it, you can make it bigger or smaller. Also, it can cast down lightning from the heavens." And Thor's like, "This is the best gift I've ever had."
Yeah, because Thor is like notoriously aggressive.
Oh yeah,
he's just like, you know what I love? Killing giants.
Like he's the
he's
the defender of Asgard.
Yeah. And so there's like here's this weapon. It won't miss.
My eyes are
it makes lightning.
My eyes are very watery.
Oh no!
I need
tearing up at the sound of this magical hand. It's an impressive piece of work.
It's a very impressive piece of work. Thank you, sound guy Chris.
Thanks, Chris,
for finding tissues for me.
The best guy.
Love him. Love that he set everything up. I just came in here and sat down.
That's right.
It was great.
That's it. That's all we did.
We love that.
If this ever becomes a vodcast,
yeah,
we're gonna have to dress a little better.
I mean, yeah,
I got a hole in my pants. I got paint all over me.
I'm wearing drawstring khakis.
I'm wearing not drawstring khakis, but carpenter pants. Because I was painting the library today. So.
Oh, nice. I went to the farmer's market today.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a good outfit. That's a good farmer's market outfit.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Kara, she went to the farmer's market because she's babysitting today. She's like spending all day with this small child, and she was given nanny money to go on like adventures with the kid.
Nice.
Yeah. And so she went to the farmer's market. I assume because she texted me and said she wanted 3 specific things from the farmer's market. She was like, "I want you to get this peach jam, and I want you to get this strawberry jalapeno jam."
Oh, that sounds good.
It is very good. I've now discovered because I
good.
have it here with me.
Oh, boy.
Because when I went there, they said to me, "This goes great if you pour it over cream cheese and then dip crackers in it.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I gotta fucking try that.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
So you ran to the store to get some crackers.
And that's what I have here. And then I foolishly did not bring plates. This is toilet paper.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but we don't.
That is
Do we
toilet.
have paper plates by chance
toilet tissue.
anywhere in
Sure.
the studio?
Thank you, everything guy Chris. He's now more than just sound guy.
We appreciate it because that will make a nice snack for us to have
It
while we
would.
record.
So
The Mjolnir is presented, and Thor is like, guys, I think Brock and Eitri win. I think like it's no contest.
Bad news for Loki.
And the other gods agree. Like Odin agrees, like this is the hammer that will defend Asgard. Is straight up like because it's widely known and acknowledged that Thor is the defender of Asgard.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately Brock's like, fantastic. All right, Loki, I'll have your head now. And the gods are like, what's this about?
Right, in all the studio, I found a paper plate.
Fantastic.
Perfect.
A single plate. It's
all we
not
needed.
paper, it's plastic, but that's immaterial. So we'll get to that here in a little bit. We'll take a little break after I'm done telling this story and have some crackers. So Brock goes to take his head off, and Loki's like, wait, hang on. Okay, you can have my head, but the agreement we made did not say anything about my neck. You cannot take any of my neck. And Odin's like, this is true.
Fair enough.
And Brock's like, how am I supposed to take his head off without taking off his neck? And Loki's like, you should have thought about that before you made the deal.
It's really your problem.
Seeing
not
as
mine.
you cannot take any of my neck, I don't think you'll be taking my head off today. And so Brock makes a very special knife that would allow him to do that. Because he's decided that he doesn't need all of the head.
Yep.
He's decided, I'll leave your jaw, that's fine. And so he goes to cut, and he can't cut. And he's like, why can't I cut you? And Loki's like, well, you see, I've made myself impervious to cutting. In case my can't cut my neck gambit didn't work. I've made myself impervious to cutting altogether.
So, in the version that's in the Edda, I believe after Odin's like, yeah, you can't touch his neck, they're like, well, how am I supposed to do that? And Odin's like, that's really on you.
Mm-hmm.
If you can figure it out, you can figure it out. And instead of trying, they settle for sewing his mouth shut.
Yeah.
They sew his mouth shut.
That's what I was going to say next.
Oh, okay.
Because he was like, all right, well, I mean, if I can't cut you, I'm going to fucking do some other horrible thing to you.
Yeah.
And then he chases Loki off. And that's the end of the story. Because then it transitions to some philosophical notions, which is this is how the gods got their weapons. This is how Mjolnir came to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because Loki just couldn't do it any other way. This is not what Loki set out to do.
No.
Like, literally, all Loki was trying to accomplish in his own way was to get Sif her hair back.
Yeah.
Because you'll notice, like, the sons of Ivan who made the hair, they did not win.
No.
That doesn't matter. Sif got her hair back.
Yeah.
And incidentally, Mjolnir's a thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, and the one, I'm just thinking this through. None of these weapons or items ever come back to bite Loki in the ass.
No.
Because Loki gets killed by Heimdall in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And Heimdall got nothing.
Well, the book goes on to the way it tells the stories. It doesn't really call back to this necessarily, but it does make me think about how actually Mjolnir, in a way, does screw Loki over. Because Loki is always being a trickster, and so anytime Thor thwarts Loki, it's because of Mjolnir.
Yeah.
That is the one exception.
Yeah, and now I'm just trying to think of it through, like, a symbolic perspective.
Sure.
You know, you have the trickster plays a trick.
Yeah.
And the result of the trick is not only things being better than they were before, or things being as they were before, but they're actually better.
Yeah. Just not for Loki.
Right, but not for like Loki gained nothing.
No. He amused himself. So he gained amusement.
I suppose.
That's about it.
I guess the takeaway would be, if you can fix the problem you caused, then it's probably okay.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's so funny.
Or
Because...
I guess the real takeaway, to not the cynical one, would be, if you cause a problem,
Yeah.
you are responsible for fixing it.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that isn't to just make things the way they were, but it's to actually give something more than what you had somehow taken away from somebody.
That was the big thing, because like it was a bit of a wrinkle, the whole thing, where it's like, all right, I'm going to take your head off then. Yeah. I mean, Loki could have come clean and been like, all right, look, here's the deal. But he would never, ever do that.
And I think that speaks to sort of what Carl Jung would call the shadow. It's the negative aspects of you.
Sure.
And so for every archetype and archetypal expression that you have consciously, there's parts of you that you repress, that you put down. You're like, nah, I'm not going to do that.
And that's where the flaws come in.
Well, and when they're not consciously expressed, the unconscious is like, well, fuck you, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
But it does it in a negative way.
Yeah.
And that's the shadow. And so Loki is the trickster. The trickster is an archetype.
Yeah.
And it can be a good one.
Yeah.
But when you constantly try to repress the trickster, that's when you get the shadow form of the trickster, and that's when it gets malevolent. Right now, Loki is not repressed. The trickster's allowed to play his tricks, and look what happens. Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Yeah.
You lose one thing, you get not only that back, but a better version of that back, and all this other stuff, thanks to the trickster. When Loki gets repressed, you get Ragnarok.
Yeah, I mean, because like all of his children, they have to figure out what to do with them.
Right. And so the next story we're going to talk about is the death of Balder.
Yeah.
Which Loki is punished for.
Yeah.
And that's really what brings about Ragnarok. It's not even that Balder's dead. It's that Loki is punished for Balder being dead. And so they physically repress the trickster, and it comes back in the form of monsters, and it ends the world. And so, psychologically speaking, that means there's a playful side to you, and if you don't give it a healthy outlet that can be constructive, it will be destructive. And it could be destructive to the point of totality. It can ruin you.
Wow.
So, play games, have fun, guys.